What up? It's the Dropping Dimes podcast. I'm your host, Mark Veer. Welcome to episode number 8 with special guests Reggie Eggins and Rufus Lott. Everybody's been looking forward to this one. We've got 2 elite officials on here who've been great to me over the years. So I appreciate you both coming on. How you guys doing?
What's up? What's up?
I'm doing well.
So real quick, we'll do intros. We talked a little bit off pod, how I met you guys. Reggie, I met you back at St. George in my playing days, in my 20s. And then we built a relationship, and you've been great for me in my refereeing career. And then Rufus, I met you at the factory with Malcolm and his group, and we were talking a little bit about that. And we'll touch on it later when we get into the podcast. But I do appreciate you both coming on. I know you've listened to all the other podcasts, and it's kind of led up to talking about referees and the state officiating is in San Antonio. Reggie, to get us started, let's talk about your journey. And Rufus, you can on the tail end, you can talk about yours, but how you got into officiating and then kind of your journey and where you are today.
First, Mark, I thank you for allowing me to come on your platform to try and help San Antonio basketball in the whole realm, from coaches to parents to fans to players to officials. My background is, believe it or not, when I was 10, 11, 12, somewhere around that age, I kid you not, I was laying in my bed one night and it just came to me that I wanted to be a referee at 10, 11, and 12 years old. Wow. I wasn't thinking about being a basketball referee. I was thinking about being a football referee. And I would be just laying in bed and do the touchdown signal, stuff like that. But at around 16 years old, I started doing Little League in my small town of Bunkie. And once I got in the military, in my second duty assignment, I joined the chapter on base and started actual training. Did softball and did basketball. Went from there, went to San Angelo, joined a chapter in my first high school chapter in San Angelo in 1990. And from there, I've been going ever since. I did football and basketball and softball. But once I figured out, hey, if I'm going to be doing football and softball, I'm going to be outside in the element, I said, I'm going to leave that alone. So I said, hey, I want to be in a controlled environment, atmosphere or whatever, and I decided to just do strictly basketball. I've been doing it for 34 years. It's going into my 35th season. I do high school. Right now I'm doing high school, college, at the D2 level and below, and a little bit of a semi-pro. And that's my background.
Yeah, great story. I didn't know that. So awesome. I thought Rufus started early, but you got him trumped on that. So Reggie, I appreciate you sharing it. Talk to us about how you got into it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, big ups to you, Mark, for re-upping the podcast and just bringing some awareness to the game. Basketball here in San Antonio, I just think it's a cool conversation. Everybody's talking about it. So big ups to you for that. As far as my journey, for those of you who know me in the city, I had opportunity to play on some of the Highlands High School teams back in the late 90s, going into the early 2000s. Didn't really get the opportunity, or I messed up the opportunity to play in college. And honestly, I just kind of needed a job. That's kind of how I got into this deal. And I remember towards our senior year, there was a kid that played on our team, and his dad actually was refereeing in the basketball chapter at the time. And we had no idea what that was. And I remember being at a tournament one time and he was talking about, hey guys, when you finish playing and you don't play at the next level, then why don't you guys come and try to officiate or whatever? And you're 17 years old, 18 years old. Nobody's thinking about going and doing that because quite honestly, sometimes being an official or the job is really a custodian style job, if you will. Like nobody wants to get yelled at. No one wants to do this work. You know what I mean? I kind of put that to deaf ears. And then it just so happened, I was going to UTSA. I just kind of needed a job. And I ran into that gentleman. Shout out to Felix Macias Sr. He's the one who got me started in basketball officiating. I ran into him at a Target on the southwest side of San Antonio. And I said, hey, you remember you were telling us about that? He was like, yeah. He says, they're getting ready to start the new member training thing. Just come on by. And I was like, cool. And so I went, kind of experienced what was going on. I was like, all right, this is all right. And then he used to take me on the weekends all the way down to Lavernia with him to go referee CYO basketball. For a 19-year-old kid who's just trying to figure out life, $12.50 an hour to go work some little Mighty Mike basketball games and go back and forth. And you kind of knew the rules. I didn't know all the motions and stuff, but I knew kind of the rules and I'd get through it. And so we'd go down there, work 10, 11 games in a row, Saturday, Sunday, come back with $300 in my pocket. And I didn't have to work the rest of the week. So then they were like, well, you can kind of do this for real when the season comes. And so I just kind of got into it. And there was this gentleman named Tony Zamora. He had a league called the Ed Ning League. And this goes way back. It was all of the San Antonio Independent School District schools. And they used to play the varsity teams on like Sunday afternoon. Because of his relationship with Coach Gonzalez, Arturo Gonzalez, they were having a conversation. And Coach Gonzalez mentioned that he had an ex-player that was trying to figure out basketball refereeing. And if it wasn't for Tony Zamora to give me an opportunity to kind of referee in that Ed Ning League, I would have never learned three-man basketball, because that's when I was introduced to the Malcolm Freemans of the world and all the people at that time who were still trying to figure it out. Because I don't think a lot of people realize here in the city of San Antonio, if you go back and you do a little history check, we didn't start three-man basketball officiating until the 2000-2001 season, which was my senior season. And so because of that, it was like the biggest thing. And so they were practicing what they were going to do in their college games, but in the high school games. And I just happened to be a part of it. So I like to say that I learned three-man officiating before I learned two-man officiating. And I just went out and hustled. And so I just started. And they introduced me to a couple people, got me into some positions to be able to go to camp and do some of those trainings and stuff in the summer to be able to work college basketball. And I had no idea who Reggie Eggins was at the time. And I remember, shout out to the Stiglianos, just because they gave us those opportunities way back then and still give us opportunities to this day. But I showed up to summer camp at St. Mary's, and I barely knew a little bit of three-man. I was just trying to figure it out. But Malcolm and them were like, just go to camp, see what happens. You know, maybe they'll pick you up, this and that. I had no idea. That seemed to be the next logical way to do it. And so I go, and when I tell you, like, I bombed, I bombed. I had no idea what I was doing, where to stand, where to be. It was a whole different way of thinking about basketball. I wasn't ready, green behind the ears. I remember sitting in the stands and I was just really down. And this guy walks in, all 6'6" in commando with a little wedge cut. And he walked in with his bag and he starts refereeing the basketball game. I was just taken aback. I was like, man, this is the guy. All the things that they were asking for. And lo and behold, I stalked Reggie for a little bit. I stalked him that whole weekend. He had no idea what I was doing. But I was watching because he was one of the best at the camp. And I had no idea. I didn't understand the work. And I just wanted to pick Reggie's brain because I just wanted to know how his journey was and how he got to where he was. Reggie and I just became like brothers in basketball. And we just decided that we were going to try our best to try to move up the ranks. And we got hired as college together the same year. We worked the championship game in Denton. Like all those things. We've been blessed to do a lot of things together, work a lot of college basketball games together. We worked the ABA national championship together. We've done a bunch of things. We've gone to the state tournament together, but it's always been this friendly competition amongst each other. And so that's just kind of like my journey. Like right now, currently as I sit, I work in 2 Division I conferences. I'm in the SEC consortium and do some of that work. And I don't know, I'm excited for this season to be able to give back and to kind of work through it. But that's just a little bit about the journey and doing this with my brother there, Reggie Eggins, along the way. Quite honestly, and I think you mentioned Mac's name. You know, we've said his name a few times, and everybody in the city knows Malcolm, but I don't think any of us would be where we are right now if it wasn't for Malcolm. And so I'm just kind of sucks that my brother's not here to see all the work that we're doing, but he's somewhere watching. So much love, rest in peace, Malcolm Freeman, for sure.
Yep, I appreciate you both sharing. It's kind of neat to hear how you both started that young. And we'll get into it later. Other coaches have talked about they want younger referees. They want to see younger referees. So I think that's what we're eventually striving to get to in San Antonio, but we'll touch on that later for sure. So let's go. First question, Rufus, of you. And again, you've listened to all the other podcasts. We've talked a lot about of where we feel the community is in San Antonio. Let's talk from obviously officiating perspective, but just at the high school level, because I've got Kenny and Raphael coming on next week. They work a lot of summer ball AAU together. Where do you feel San Antonio is as far as officiating today?
I just think we're in a bit of a transitional phase. I think all of the mentors and people who were heavily involved in high school basketball, who I looked up to, who kind of birthed me in this work, those individuals are at the tail ends of their careers. And many of them realize it. Many of them understand that. And so I just feel like we're in this transitional phase where the baton is being passed to the next generation of referees who are coming back behind them. And I think one of the things that I noticed that is a little different from when I was trying to scratch my way through was that and I think somebody said, I want to say Anissa or somebody said this in one of the other podcasts, was that there's this, I don't know, this level of entitlement with the kids. They think something's owed to them. And I think that same kind of idea plays into our world as well. There's this entitlement phase, like I should be, or I have arrived. And the general rule of thumb and the way that we were always taught was where you think you are today you're actually 2 years behind where you think you are today. And when you hear that, you're like, whatever, like I'm ready to go referee, like I'm there. And then you go and you work one of these crazy games, and then you're like, wait a minute, maybe I am not where I think that I am. And that's something that I had to grapple with when I was really trying to work it, because I just felt like I was just moving, and I wanted more. And then you run into these situations where you have to self-reflect and tailor yourself back and go, wait a minute, like maybe I'm not all the way ready to be able to do that. I just think that we're just in this transitional phase of giving up the guard, if you will. And I think that there's another group of referees that have to come behind us, to have some hunger, that want to be able to move up through the ranks. But even if it's not even moving up through the ranks, just wanting to be the best high school basketball official that you can be. And so I just, like I said, I just think we're in this transitional phase. There's a lot of room to grow. There's a lot of interested individuals, but we have to really cultivate that understanding and that fire again with our referees.
Yeah, and to touch on that, it's funny you said about the 2 year. I remember you saying that. I was like you guys on a fast track moving up, and you said it to me. I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't know what you talking about, Rufus. Then we go to that Dallas playoff game, and the bright lights were big for me. I get in the car, and you're just like, what do you think? I knew what I thought. I'm like, yo, that game was above my head, and thank goodness you were in the game. The other partner was like, everything was good. I'm like, yeah, no self-evaluation there. We got a long drive home. It hit me like, yeah, I am nowhere near where I thought I was. So it's 100%. And if you can self-evaluate as a referee, I think that's going to help you in your growth. And Boomman touched on it too, about the culture difference from possibly, let's just say San Antonio and Dallas, the healthy competition. And Mac would talk about this all the time with us, right? It's like, we've got to get a group of us that are holding each other accountable. That's healthy conversations, but we always hold each other accountable. That I think is definitely lacking. We just talked off pod about it, about how I met you guys. Mac only used a certain amount of people up here at the factory. I wasn't even refereeing, I was just running tournaments, but there was a select people that he wanted to grow, and always talking about refereeing. That's what you said. I just don't think we have those conversations anymore. So I appreciate you touching that. I can definitely attest to that. I've seen it happen. Reggie, what you got on the question?
I feel that we have reached a pinnacle in basketball atmosphere as far as officiating. We reached a pinnacle when back when Mac was still here. You know, myself, you, Rufus, Ralph, and a whole lot of others. We were stacked as far as good, solid. We were at least 30, 35 deep in good officiating that can go in and work practically any ball in San Antonio, in my opinion. I don't think that's the case right now. And Rufus kind of touched on it. Anissa touched on it. Camacho touched on it. They did it as far as players, but I'm doing it as far as officials, where that entitlement is there. And I don't know if it's a generational gap or whatever, but the entitlement is definitely there. The state of San Antonio basketball officiating, in my opinion, is very low. When I joined the chapter, San Antonio chapter in 1990, we used to meet at Fort Sam. And I was, of course, I'm in the back. I don't know anybody, but I'm a competitive person where I kind of look and see who's talking the most, whose opinion matters and stuff like that. So I'm looking around and I see this group of officials in the front corner, the front right corner of Fort Sam, and I'm looking and I'm recognizing who those officials are, and those are the officials that everybody is looking to. Who is talking on the stage? These are the guys that when they chime in, everybody listens to. So I said, okay, I got them registered. I'm going to start watching them. This is what we're lacking today. We don't have officials that want to get to the Rufus level, to the Ralph level, to the Marks level. We need officials that want to be us and beat us, that want to take our place. I want, as an officiating chapter, I don't care if it's Greater San Antonio or San Antonio, I want officials to come and get me, to come and get Rufus. That's just going to better the culture of San Antonio basketball. But we don't have that today. We have officials today that think that once they get into these field houses, that they have arrived and they have to do nothing else. Yep. That's all they need to do. They don't need to study. They don't need to know the rules. They don't need to know the mechanics. They don't need to know the positioning. They don't need to know how to get open looks. If you tell them something during the game, they get all in their feelings, those type of things. So, and we end up, Rufus, Ralph, yourself, and others like us who want to help end up stop talking to them or stop trying to course correct, right? Because we get shut down. So that's where I think I think we need to get back to that competitive level.
Yeah, I agree. And it's happened quick too, because I've only been in the chapter 12 years. But I remember when I first got in my very first meeting it was at Antonian, and I walked in with Mac. He's like, "Come sit over here." I'm like, "Okay." I go sit at the front left by the stage, and all you guys are there, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay." He's like, "Just sit here and be quiet." Got it. I could do that. But then to your point, that was where all the top referees sat. Those are the ones dominating the meeting, getting up. They get on stage. People listening to them. I said, okay, I don't know a lot of these people around me, but there's somebody in this chapter. And everyone was kind of separated in their groups, but it wasn't like a divide. It was more like respect. You a top dog, you sit here. You're the next tier, you're there. Now you go to meetings, everybody just kind of sits where they want. I see a lot of the veterans at the back.
Yes.
Like, what are you doing at the back? You should be at the front. To your point, what's the difference between San Antonio officiating and Dallas? Because we compare a lot from the grassroots and from the high school. It comes down to, I think the same in San Antonio is they're competitive. They have healthy competition. If you're at the top, people are trying to catch you. I believe, and from an assigning perspective, when I did it for 2 years, is if you're at the top, there's not much accountability because no one's even close to you. You can stay the same, don't have to get better. You're going to work the same schedule, work postseason, and your name will probably be on a regional state list. Rufus, what do you think about that?
I agree. And to Reggie's point, and man, you have to understand, I was like, I think my very first season, I had just graduated high school, so I was all of 18 years old. And I'm in a room full of men who knew me. These people just got done officiating my basketball games. You know what I mean? Like, they knew me, but they didn't know me. And even in that group of men, it was like I had to prove myself. But to Reggie's point, I remember taking that in. Like, I want to figure out how to be those guys. And to me, that's athleticism, or that's the athlete mentality. And it's not like you're going in because I'm gonna knock these people off. You're going in because you want to be a part of that culture. You want to be the best that you can be in your organization. You want to be known for something, especially if you're going to dedicate time away from family and hours to this craft. And so I just think that level of competitiveness it's just not existing the way that it did. And I used to just get in the car sometimes and just drive. I used to be the driver, or I would just go just so that I could be around the culture and listen and hear. I learned more about refereeing from talking about refereeing than I actually done like actually working games. But it was just always being around and then being a part of it. That's what always drove me. And I just think that some of that is missing. But I think there's a lot of people who want to, they just don't know how. And that is on us. And I think we need to own that, right? I think that's on the next people. I think that's on us. And because if I had a question, if I was trying to do that, I had those answers. I had the direction. People showed me how to go and where to be and where to show up and what to do. And I think as call us the senior guys now, I think we can own some of that. I think we've got to do a better job of putting people in position, or at least having conversations. But the difference is this, and this goes back to that entitlement kind of piece. Like, I don't know who wants to do that. I don't know who's interested. I'm not picking up the phone and calling 50 guys and doing that. And if it was me and I wanted to do that, I was calling that person. Hey, can I jump in the car with you? Hey, where are you guys working this weekend? I want to go watch. Is that cool? Can I come into your pregame? I was going and finding those opportunities. So I would challenge those officials who are younger, who have less experience, who are interested in potentially moving on to the next ranks. And you've got to reach out. You've got to find somebody to go, hey, how do I do that? I'm interested in doing that. What is the roadmap to get that done?
The next thing I want to dive into is Anissa wanted this answered. She's talking on a lot of other coaches in the city, and this is going to be the teams that play in Dallas or Houston early season. They go to Allen, right? They go to Whataburger tournaments. They go to Allen tournaments. They go play in those. They do that over the break. As soon as they get back, they go right into district play. Then they play district play. Then they got to go into playoffs. And these teams are reaching it far. They're going to regionals. They're trying to get to state. They're ranked, all that good stuff, right? So she has a program, and a lot of coaches touched on this. San Antonio is doing pretty well at the high school level, getting teams to the state tournament or regionals, right? We're doing pretty well, I think, from 3A to 6A. So we're producing good high school teams. Brendan, obviously, on the boys, Veterans Memorial, 5A, 6A. The girls always, Clark went back to back. It goes on and on. Bernie's doing a really good job. Lytle was there. Cole High School. So San Antonio High School, from the state perspective, is doing very well. We're getting teams there every single year for quite some time. Their question, obviously, is why is it called so much different in Dallas and Houston than it is in San Antonio. And you two can touch on this because you've worked so much postseason in Dallas and Houston. You work at the collegiate level where you get to see the games you see every night are just like a 6A game in Dallas and Houston, right? It's high flying, all that stuff. But I work on the girls' side as on women's side, so I see it as well. I don't think if it's boys or girls, the game is called different in Dallas and Houston than it is in San Antonio. And I'm telling you that from an assigner and from a referee, and you're both laughing because you know it. So it's a loaded question, but Rufus, will start with you. Why do you feel it's called different in those three cities? Houston and Dallas obviously being more physical, less whistles, possibly letting them play through stuff, and it's a little tighter here in San Antonio.
I don't all the way know if it's called differently in terms of outside the lines of the rule book.
Right.
And so I would venture to say that, right? I don't think it's called differently, like outside those lines. I think when it comes, you have to understand, right? You have rule book refereeing, and then you have, like, there's an art to this job, right? Or this is avocation. And I think what ends up happening is because the competition is what the competition is in other places, the level of the way the game is processed through the lenses of referees in those areas is just different. You hear people say this they use this term called game interrupters. We're taught, right, at a high level of basketball, you're taught to have things like a cadence whistle, and people always say, "Oh, they're calling that later. They're waiting to see if that ball goes in or whatever." All that stuff is in the art of refereeing. Yeah, you know what? I am going to hold that whistle just for a second to see him stuff that, because you know what? The fans didn't come to watch me. They came to see that dunk happen, and we're going to play on, and no harm, no foul in this play. It's the idea of how the plays are being processed. Now, I will say this, because some of those other areas have legitimized grassroots pro-am leagues. I've refereed some of the rec ball that's there in some of those areas in Houston and going into Dallas. That stuff is very high level basketball. And when you talk about putting yourself in position to get better and to train, like their hustle refs, their hustle time is going and working those games. And they're taking that mentality that they're utilizing in some of those pro-am ball games, the mentality that they're taking, that they're seeing, and they are bringing that mentality into the high school basketball game. And so the referees are seeing the game a little differently. One of the things that we always talk about is this idea. It's called rhythm, speed, balance, and quickness. And when you get down to the root of what officiating is, it's making a decision whether or not someone's rhythm, speed, balance, or quickness was impacted by contact. That's really all this is. And if you can come to the conclusion that in this particular play, if I'm slow enough with my whistle to be able to process the start, the finish, and the end, and someone's rhythm, speed, balance, and quickness isn't impacted by what's taking place, I'm probably not going to put a whistle on that play. And the crazy thing, and I think where some of the difference is no one in those gyms expects there to be a call on some of that contact. No one expects that. But then sometimes when we're in our gyms, right, it's expected that happens, that there's a whistle on that play. And so when there isn't a whistle on that play, then they say, oh, well, they let us get beat up. They let us. It's like, no, it's just how we process the play, how we see the play, and the way that we're trained to see the play. And if it doesn't have impact and we can play on, then we're going to play on and avoid those game interrupters. And so I would say that it's not that it's so much it's called differently, or I can't even, you can't even get into like, well, those kids can take more contact. Like, I don't even play into all of that. It's just more so what play is presented at that time. And if that play has an opportunity to play on versus it being stopped, or we're going to stop the game and there's going to be a possession consequence for whatever is going to take place, I would rather not do that. And I think everybody else would rather that not happen. And so I just come at it from that perspective. And I think like even when we go from San Antonio and we go out, like you said, to go work in some of the other areas of the state, we apply that same type of thinking to those games. But it's not that you're changing the rules or changing what you're doing. It's more so you're going into your tool bucket of the art of officiating, and you're looking for certain things that are going to have impact in the ball game. And so it's tough to say why it is or why it isn't. I just know that we're not calling the game out of the ordinaries of the rules. It's just the art of officiating takes over and kind of how we do it there.
I want to add some context because I've heard from coaches probably the last 10 years, from being like the camp director to the rules guy to like the video guy, just send Mark clips, he'll figure it out, and then to the assigner. So I've built a lot of relationships over the last probably 10 years with coaches. 100% agree with you, kind of the expectations in Dallas, because every coach in Dallas and Houston I've talked to with postseason you're going to let us play right. I mean, it's every time like, hey, we're going to use San Antonio. Y'all going to let us play right. Send me a crew that's going to let us play. That is consistent in Houston and Dallas. So that's the expectation from the coaches, from the fans, from the players. Like, hey, our referees here let us play a little bit more. So if we're going to go outside, this is what we're used to all year. In San Antonio, it's mixed across the board. There's some coaches like, hey, we need a crew that's going to call a little tight, right, Mark? And then, hey, yo, you're going to let us play, right? Or, hey, I don't mind you letting us play. We got to be consistent. Or it's all over the place. So I wanted to add some context on that because I know some coaches are going to be listening. Some coaches want it called tight and some do not. So I think there's some inconsistency from what we hear from coaches night to night and then different expectations from fan base as well. So I 100% agree with it. I agree. I don't think it's out of the rules because some people told me that like they can play through more stuff in Houston, Dallas. We're not going there. That is not even a conversation to have as referees. To your point, I think you nailed it. It's kind of the environment and the expectations that's set in those particular cities. Why would you go in and disrupt that? And I think San Antonio, the fix is from high school coaches and referees and assigners need to come together and figure out what is the expectation in San Antonio across the board, and then we can have some level of consistency.
I'm going to go a different route than Rufus said. And not that I'm disagreeing with anything Rufus said, but I think when it comes to San Antonio officiating plays differently than the way that the Dallas or the Houston area officials officiate. And when I say that, and Anissa said it in her podcast, is the tic-tac, the touchy stuff, right? But in my opinion, I think we all have an ownership on that. I think the coaches have an ownership of it. The fans' expectations have an ownership on it. And, of course, the officials have an ownership of it. So what do I mean by that? In San Antonio, there is an expectation that if a body's on the floor, we need a whistle, right? That is not officiating. Just because the body's on the floor, why is that body on the floor?
Right. Mm-hmm.
What made that body hit the floor? The coaches have an expectation of that. When their girls or their boys hit the floor, they want a whistle. In San Antonio, you go to any gym in San Antonio and somebody hits the floor, you see arms in the air, you see questions coming out, and they want a whistle. So the coaches need to have ownership of that. Officials need to have ownership of it. So I think it's on us to prepare these teams for the next level, right? When we go to playoffs, right? And we go outside of San Antonio, we don't call, if me, Rufus, and Mark, if we're in the game together, we're not calling as if we're in San Antonio. Now, keep it real.
Yeah,
We already know, right? So why do we go outside and call the way that it should be called, and then at home we call differently? I don't believe in that, right? And a lot of our officials in San Antonio referee for the next game. They know the power of the scratch list.
Yep.
They don't want to hurt feelings. They don't want to have conflict, right? So they shy from blowing the whistle. Or if the coach is yelling at them, guess what's going to happen? Here comes a whistle,
Yep.
right? We have to do better, and that's what I believe in. Officials have to own their decision, right? If you put air in the whistle or you don't put air in the whistle, own that decision and explain it to the coach why you did or did not put air in the whistle. The coaches have high IQs. They understand BS when they hear it, and they understand basketball terminology when they hear it. Just explain it to them, and they will get through it. They will adjust, right? And that's just my opinion. That's the difference between Dallas and Houston when they're going outside of San Antonio.
Yeah, I would add that I can't really say that we've conscientiously said we're going to call the game differently tonight just because we're in this arena. Like I don't think we've conscientiously have done that. I think in our pre-games, what we've done is, number one, we recognize where we are. Okay, we recognize the calibers of teams that are going to be there, and we've made the decision as a crew that tonight we are going to make sure that we are foundational in our crew dynamics, that we're foundational in the things that are going to make us work together in fluidity. And then we're going to go out and we're going to do that. We're going to be patient. We're going to see the plays as they're presented to us. And then we're going to make decisions that are the best decisions for the ball game, especially in those high level moments or when the competition rises. Isn't necessarily about putting air in your whistle. It's about not putting air in your whistle, and to have enough fortitude within yourself as a referee to go, that's the play, that's how it started, that's how it finished, buckets in, no harm, no foul, let's rock and roll. Now people are like, okay, because it's expectability. And I tell you right now, me and Marshall agree and we disagree on a lot of things. But one of the things that he taught me a long time ago was that this idea of expectability. Like there are certain plays in an arena that everybody in an arena, the team that's getting the call and the team that's the call is going against, everybody in that arena is like, that's a foul and that's a whistle. Those are the ones that we cannot miss. So this idea of we change the way we referee or we change the way that we call, I think the circumstances cause us to think about the game differently. But I'm still going to go out there and you're going to get the same person every night. I'm going to see the plays for what the plays are. And if the decision is made to put air in the whistle or not to put air in the whistle, then that's what it is.
I said on my last podcast, and I stay true to it, San Antonio refereeing is the worst it's ever been since I've been in this chapter, 12 years. And I stay on that statement. I believe San Antonio refereeing is the worst it's ever been. So that's real. I'm just being honest with you. That's my personal opinion. I've been in the trenches for 12 years, and I'm bringing light to it. And I think we all are. So to sit here and say officiating is not have any issues in San Antonio, that's not true, right? However, we've dug into that. Let's talk solutions. But before we get into that, I don't know if you heard about Anissa and Camacho. They want to start a committee. They want to start a committee how we can bring both chapters together. After that podcast, I immediately got on the phone and called some people from Greater San Antonio. And I wanted to get some history before I was around and why the chapters separated. And we're not going to talk about that because that's here or there. That was 20-something years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about growing San Antonio basketball from all entities, from coaches to grassroots to tournament directors to parents to referees, everything, right? If bringing two chapters together, I will start with you, Reggie. So why do we not have, or why can we not have one chapter in San Antonio and we can bring 600 plus referees under one umbrella to cover all the games in San Antonio?
Mark, you and I talked about this a long time ago. I honestly believe that it is in the best interest of San Antonio basketball for us to first, before we start trying to join chapters, right, to first pick out the top 40 to 45 officials between Greater San Antonio and San Antonio chapter. Take that 45 and put them in the top 15 games in the city on any given varsity night. If you do that, here's what I believe. If you do that, number one, the coaches and the student athletes are going to be serviced with some of the best officials in San Antonio, regardless of affiliation of chapter, right? They're going to get the top 45 and the top 15 games, right? Let's do that. I don't care if it's girls, boys, or whatever. Take those 45. Now, what that will do is those that are not in the top 45, what we talked about earlier, we want to compete.
Mm-hmm.
So those that are not in the top 45 now has something to work for, to try and knock somebody out of that top 45 to replace, right? So that brings in the competition between both chapters, right? Within the chapter, you got whoever's outside the top 45 are trying to get inside of the top 45, right? Great. But in the same instance, every game in San Antonio is going to have the best officials in it. That's in my opinion. Start there. Now you have a bridge to start with. Once that works, then you can start about combining the chapter after that and have those. You still have the rodeo circuit like we used to have, right? Have those officials going to rodeo circuits, learning during varsity level ball games, getting paid the same thing, and getting that experience, and still trying to compete to get into to whatever field houses, what Wagner, Judson, Steele, East Central, what have you, Clemens, whatever you want, veterans. You have those officials striving to get in those games. In my opinion, that's how we got to do it.
Okay, Rufus, add to it.
I think it just boils down to product. I think San Antonio's Coke and South Texas or GZAC is Pepsi. It just boils down to product. I think over time, because of a lot of the things that occurred, both publicly, behind closed doors, and politically between the chapters, there's just a lot of sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. Not just the people who are involved as officiating and those are on those boards that are running those organizations, but I also think that it kind of spilled over into the coaches a little bit. And I think some of the coaches and athletic directors kind of aided a little bit to that, saying that, or kind of played us against each other a little bit, saying like, well, if this doesn't occur, then I'm just going to go with the person to the south of us. And it just really puts us in a tough position as a community, because then it kind of puts you in a box where you have to go, well, I guess we're going to have to succumb to this pressure in order to maintain or to keep. And so you have that at play. What's crazy and what's kind of happened with this is that a lot of the people who left San Antonio originally, because San Antonio is essentially birthed GSAC, or birthed, because a lot of those guys left and went down to Divine or wherever their home base was to be able to do that. And they took all those word districts. It actually helped, but they got a lot of experience in what they were doing. And over time, they were able to attract a lot of individuals. They also were able to attract a lot of coaches who weren't just happy with the product. And when you get down to the root of it, I just think that's what it boils down to. It's like, who on any given night is going to put the best product on the floor? And yes, you have to have X amount of bodies to be able to cover the ball games in a particular district or whatever. But who's going to be able to do that? Who's going to be able to do that proficiently? Who's going to be able to do that professionally? Who's going to be able to make sure that those games are being called to the greatest proficiency by the rule and all those things? There's going to be accountability. And so I think when it gets down to it, it's who's going to hold the most accountability from those individuals. What board is going to really do that? Now, as far as like putting chapters together, that's going to take a mountain to do. You're going to have to move a mountain to be able to do that. Is it the best thing for our area? Absolutely. There should be one chapter in our entire surroundings, just kind of like what we used to do, that services everything. It's all under one officiating board. So accountability can be accountability, where ADs and coaches know where to go, who to contact, and what to make happen. I think eventually over the next year or so, what you're going to see is whoever the schools decide they're going to use, you're going to be able to see which chapter is going to thrive in our area. If another larger school district decides that GSAC is the product, that they're going to be able to utilize them to service their schools because that's their choice, then you're going to see, okay, well, that's another larger school district. Well, they're going to attract more referees. And you're just going to see this tide kind of shift. Do I want to see that happen? No, this is my 24th year in San Antonio basketball. Like, I've been loyal to San Antonio basketball. I think I'll always be loyal to San Antonio basketball. This chapter really birthed me. But having been a part of the old school way of things and how we've transitioned to this new stage of where we are, yeah, it's a little troubling to see, and it hurts a little bit. Call it what you want. You're going to see the same referees because they're just going to leave one chapter. They're going to go to the next because everybody's a private contractor, and you can go work where you want to work. And so you're going to see the same bodies. You're going to see the same people. It's just a matter of who's the governing body. So can they live together? Sure. Should they live together? Probably. Tomorrow, it just can't happen just because of what's taking place historically.
Solutions. How can we get referees passionate, either starting out, grant recruitment, getting referees like you right out of high school, giving back to the game that actually really love basketball, or just referees that may be stuck. They've been a high school referee 10, 15, 20 years. They're just not passionate. They're like, you know what? I'm just going to go do my games. I don't care how I do. And so just in general, how can we get passion back into officiating in the city?
I just think we have to have more people that played the game involved with it, with stripes. If you understand the ball game, if you played the ball game, I just think that officials who have some experience actually on the floor as a player tend to make really great referees. We always joke and say some guys who just come and they just have a little bit of basketball knowledge are sometimes already better than some referees that just have mechanics because they have a feel for the game. I think we have to market this outside of it just being a crazy avocation that maybe somebody doesn't want to be. Some of what happens is a little bit to someone's ignorance as to what are the possibilities that can take place if you choose to do that. There's a lot of money to be made in any sport, being a sports official. And because there's a shortage nationwide in all sports, there's opportunities as well to get involved and to learn and to really do it. It's getting people into training. It's getting people excited about what that looks like. And it's also giving people opportunity to witness, experience, and see the fruits of their own labor. It doesn't serve anybody any purpose. Like, I've been at this for 5 years and I've done everything that I'm supposed to do and I still can't get a high school playoff game. Like that kind of stuff. It's not that someone is owed that, But if you're actually putting in the work, no different than you would at your job, like eventually you want that promotion, or you want somebody to recognize what you've done, your hard work. So it's being able to educate, being able to tell people what it is, being able to market officiating, and not just this closet kind of custodial style job, but it's something that, number one, you're going to give back to your community. Number two, you're going to still be involved in the basketball game, just like anybody else. It's fun. It's the competition when you're with the right groups is extremely fun. And being able to be out there and problem solve and be able to go through some things, and then the stories and the friendships and all those things that come with it. I mean, y'all are my friends for life. Even if we stop officiating tomorrow, the experiences that we've had, the places that we've gone, the conversations that we have, the stories, we can sit around and we can talk for hours about the things that happen on the road when we're out there and we're working games and all this. I mean, all these experiences. Like, we have to be able to show people that this is truly a fraternity. This is truly a brotherhood, a sisterhood of individuals that are just trying to do something better for the next generation of students that are coming behind us. And so it's our opportunity to give back.
Rufus, when's the best time to get in the stock market?
When it's low.
When it's low. Referee shortage. Referee is low right now. It's very low.
Opportunity.
This is the best time to get into referee. So you're going to move up if you have passion, if you put in the work. If you get into this game right now, you are on the fast track to getting to where, if you have passion, where you want to be at. Okay? The market is very low, right? Mark, you touched on it in some of the other podcasts. The game fees are going up, right? The game fees are going up. We getting paid more sometimes for high school nights than we do for junior college, right? You have opportunities in officiating. You have opportunities. All you got to do is step in the door. The door is wide open.
We talked a lot in the last podcast about culture. You talk about McCullum, Lynn, and Neer. You guys both work their games. You think culture, right? I think refereeing in San Antonio, the culture just needs to change. And you made a good point. It's like, we're junkies. We love this. We can do this all day. But we're not asking people to do that, right? You can't make somebody be as passionate about officiating as we. But that doesn't mean that we can't hold them accountable. So from the top referees in any association to the ones that just want to work the middle school games, you need them. Referees always assign this all. We need you, man. You want to work 6 middle days a week? I got you. I'm gonna load you up, right? But they still want to be the best referee in that environment. So I think if we can change the culture in San Antonio from all entities, there'll be accountability at every level. You want to be best AAU referee on the weekend. You're a weekend warrior, and that's what you do every weekend for 12 months out of the year. You're working weekends. You'll be the best select AAU referee you can, middle and so forth. They do a better job in that in Dallas, man. I talk to a lot of referees in Dallas, and they hold all their referees accountable, and just the culture is a little different. I think we can get there. I really do. It starts with competition. Like you guys said, the solution is if we can get a little more competitive with refereeing in the city, I think that get there. One last question, and we'll close out is, so I'm talking about how, this is a little more specific question. Rufus, you can start. How does San Antonio officiating better under these two items? Because this is the most I always hear from every coach. If you had to poll coaches, what do you think referees need to get better at? It's always the 2 C's: communication and consistency. Not necessarily play calling, right? They're taught being consistent on the way they're calling, but the communication is number one, right? Either the referee is barking back or ignoring, right? So what are ways, those are definitely two issues that I think every probably association has in officiating. What do you think referees can get better? Any advice for those two items, communication and consistency, and how we can close that gap and improve in the city?
Well, I think on the communication thing, like I went through some things trying to figure it out, right? I've gone nose to nose and toes to toes with some coaches and stuff over the years, and I've had some experiences that I regret. I've apologized to coaches offline about the way that I've handled certain circumstances. Shout out Coach Bodges, who called me out at the state tournament one year for some of those things. There's a whole story about that. So if you see Coach Bodges in the gym someplace, ask him about.
Wants to come
he's
on.
gonna come on.
I may write that down.
Oh, then he can
tell a story.
Then he can tell that story, But it took me a little bit of time, and Malcolm ripped me for that as well. It took me a little bit of time to kind of find my way in it. where I felt like I could say what I needed to say, but I had to grow up a little bit. Sometimes I put the stripes on and I felt like I was all power and authority on the floor, and I had to learn how to have a different kind of discord. And I just think over time I developed that, and it started with just a bunch of one-liners, and really Tony and John Stigliano kind of taught us all that kind of stuff, man. It's just a bunch of one-liners, and it's just like, it's like, Coach, I hear you. It's just little things, right? Tell me what you're thinking on that play. What are you seeing? I'm not seeing it that way. Talk with me. Like, just little things like that just get me across the line. That's how I started. And then over time, you get relationships built with coaches, and then you're able to do things and have different kind of conversations with them. I would say on the opposite side of it, right, is that sometimes our coaches, they tend to attack. And what I had to learn is that I had to be the person who douses that fire out versus make it rise. My goal is to get out of a game without a technical foul. I think that's every official's goal is to get out of a game without a technical foul. But I also think that it puts us in a very vicarious position. Like, if you're listening to the podcast, like, nobody goes to your job while you're making copies at the copier in the break room or whatnot, yelling and screaming at you, or just on the sideline. Like, you don't have to yell and scream at me to communicate with me either. Because if I turn around and I yell and scream at you, you're not going to like the way that I've responded to your response. And so I would say that it requires both people, but it's also, there's just a certain level of professionalism. The game, though, has evolved, right? It's evolved from where it used to be, right? You had the Bobby Knights that would throw a chair, and it was entertainment. All that was great. And we had a lot of those coaches, my pops included, right? My dad would yell and scream, right? He knew Reggie's name real fast. But over time, right, a lot of that same types of things, that's not cool anymore. The kids don't react to that well. The students and the parents aren't reacting to that kind of stuff well. ADs don't want anything to do with any of that liability these days. And so the game has evolved. The game has changed. Now, what I'm seeing from the younger officials is that the way that they're communicating is that they just don't. But I promise you, if they could text message while they were doing it, they probably would communicate a whole lot. So that just involves being able to, like, arm them with a couple of one-liners just to acknowledge. And I think ultimately that's what really frustrates coaches, is that I'm trying to talk, but they don't even like look at me, or they're not even acknowledging that I'm saying anything. And so my advice would be, like, don't bullshit a coach. Just chances are they already know the answer when they asked it. Be real. And when we talk about pre-games and stuff, especially if I have not a relationship, but I know a coach and I know what he's going to do. I know who that person is. You have Marcus and those guys on, man. I tell my crews, I'm like, hey, these are basketball guys. So don't go in there trying to, like, quote rule 7, whatever to these people. That's not how they're going to operate. That's going to just piss them off. You got to be able to articulate why it is that you blew that whistle, but do it in basketball terms and just have that conversation. I think coaches appreciate that. And so I just think we have to just get better. Communication is it. The consistency thing, that's leave it up to whomever, right? You can say this play is not being here and this play is not being there. And that's one of the biggest gripes. I think expectability is bigger than the consistency factor. I think there's a lot of plays that we missed that the arena goes, that should have been a foul and there's no whistle. And it's like, how are these 3 guys on the floor and we get nothing out of that? And I think that's what really frustrates people. But consistency just starts with sort of kind of matching plays. And that's another, like, philosophy of thinking and refereeing. It's not that you're going to make things up, but if you have a block charge play that's a close block charge play on this end of the basketball game and it went block on this end, and you have something similar happen on the other end, as a crew dynamic, you have to log that play and go, that probably should be a block also. And that's all coaches are asking for. It's like, why? They'll say, why is that a block here, but is this a charge over here, when it's the same, almost similar play? It's like, they probably should have just been blocks, or they probably should have just been charges. They can stomach that. And I just tell my crews, like, what does they say? 2 wrongs don't make it right. We're not going to make things up. If we miss it, we miss it. We're going to move on from it. Just like if a kid misses a pass or misses a shot, they move on from it. So are we. We're not going to try to start matching plays all game, because then we're trying to fix the game and do some other stuff, and it's not a healthy deal. So I say consistency, it happens. It's just how we communicate with the coaches, how they communicate with us. I think that's important. Specifically, if you recognize that one of the officials on a crew is probably like your freshman official on the crew, like, just don't attack that guy. He's already kind of spazzing that he's in the ball game. He's got a lot of things going through his head. Like, just don't attack him. Attack the senior guy, if you will. Have a conversation there. Let him relay some of that information. Use the people that you have relationships on the floor with to help get your point across. I think that's going to save you some grief, because you don't know what they're going to do. You don't want to be put in that position. But at the same time, you can still get your point across.
When I hear the word consistency, to me, consistency is a perception. Okay, it's whatever the coaches perceive as consistency. But I will say this: consistency has nothing to do with team fouls. I got 8 to 5 team fouls. Can we be consistent? That has nothing to do with team fouls. that team fouls has to do with styles of play. One team is playing aggressive, the other team is not. One team is going to the basket, the other team is shooting 3-point shots. The consistency has nothing to do with team fouls. Consistency does have something to do with similar plays having similar results. Okay, that's consistent. Communication. I'm going to own up to some things because I've grown a lot in my 34 years of basketball. When I first got to San Antonio, this was my first favorite call right here. That was my favorite call. I didn't want to take nothing from nobody because I felt like, number one, I came in with experience, right, calling high school ball, but nobody knew me. So I didn't understand the challenges that the coaches were bringing to me. So my result was to whack them, right? So I've grown from that. I've also grown from, and this all deals with communication. I've also grown with understanding that the assistant coaches are an official's best friend. If you can reel in the assistant coach, right, and get him to help you with the head coach in the times that you need help with the head coach, that's going to save you a lot of headaches, right? Also, understanding that those assistant coaches that you're building relationships with are
Head coach.
in a few years going to become head coaches. So you're going to already have that relationship when they become a new head coach. I've learned this in my years of experience. The other thing I also learned is players. Establish relationship with players. Understanding that players are going to be emotional, especially high school students. They're going to be emotional. Don't penalize them for being emotional. Penalize them for bad behavior, but don't penalize them for being emotional. You can talk them down from emotion, right? You correct bad behavior, right? The other thing I want to say, Mark, is I watched some of your old podcasts, and I could not believe that Joey still remembered me telling him to turn the page. Yeah. Those are some of those one-liners that Rufus was talking about, because he was stuck on one play, and we went down the court two or three times, and I eventually had to tell him, Coach, we got to turn the page. We got to move on to something else. And I really appreciate him remembering that point. Mark, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Do it anytime you need me to do it. You know I'm here for you.
We could talk all day officiating. So I know how both care about the city. Rufus, 24 years. Reggie, 35. So much experience. You've seen the game change so much in the city. I know you're always trying to, strive for it to be better in your own terms as officials, and of course, referees that are up and coming. I just want to close on it. Is we talked about marketing. Why not? All right, we got a platform. We got a podcast, and we need referees. It ain't no secret to it. San Antonio needs officials. And so, yeah, if anybody's listening, you're an ex-player, maybe about to be done playing, coaches, anybody that you may know, just reach out to any three of us. We will get you with the right people, set you up for success. Yes. All the things we talked about, the opportunities. And for whatever reason, if you just want it as a side hustle right now, everybody starts officiating for their own reason. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to do it strictly for the money, great. We got spots for you. If you want to grow and get better and be a high school referee, we got spots for you. You want to even go in further and be a college and a pro referee, we got spots for you. But just getting started is the first step. And I, challenge anybody, any basketball head that's on here listening, reach out to us. Let's get you in the stripes on the court and just see where it takes you. I appreciate you both hopping on, spending time with me. And again, improve the city from your opinions to educating. We definitely did that tonight, and we'll just see where this takes the city. I appreciate you both, and we'll be talking again soon. Take care.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to the Dropping Dimes podcast. Make sure to go follow us on IG at Dropping Dimes Pod. Remember, each Friday we'll be dropping a new episode, so hit the follow and bell notification buttons to never miss any content. Let's get better together. We out.